Welcome to Politics Now, where we talk with newsmakers and candidates for Nevada's top political offices, and in one of those offices in 2020 will be Congress and the 3rd Congressional District, probably the most competitive Congressional District. We welcome to the program Dan Schwartz. Thanks for being here.
Steve, thanks for having me.
You are former state treasurer. That's probably where most people know you from. Served from 2014 to 2018. You also ran for governor in 2018, the Republican primary. So up to now, you've run for state offices. So why switch to Congress? Why switch to federal office?
I actually, for those who remember, there was an earlier election in CD4, but no. One of the things I learned as state treasurer was that Nevada is a great state. There are a lot of things that need to be done. I probably, like many Americans, have had it with Congress and gridlock. I think CD3 is now represented by a card-carrying member of the Pelosi Brigade, and it's time for a change. Enough is enough. So there are a lot of things I'd like to do in Congress, and if I'm elected, this will give me a chance to do that.
Yeah. When you were elected in 2014, it was a very Republican year. Republicans won every office up and down the ticket. You didn't have a primary, as I recall. I did not, no. In that race. Will you need another Republican year in 2020 to win that seat, or this is a very closely divided district? It's only a couple of points Democratic advantage, fewer than I think 10,000 votes separate Republicans from Democrats. Can you win in a non-Republican year if it's not one?
Yeah, I mean, I think you ask a good question, and that's clearly the challenge here. As I say, we've looked at the issues, and I think the presidential election is going to come down to one issue: do you like President Trump or not? I think the congressional election is going to come down to one issue. Do you favor a Democrat socialism? And if you don't believe that, watch the presidential debates. or do you favor a private enterprise approach to government? Do you like big government, or do you like smaller government that is really focused on business and economics? And I think that's the choice. As you suggested, it's a battleground district. I've actually seen where Cook rates it as R+2. I've seen D+2, and I've seen R+2.
You're talking about likely voters in that.
Yeah,
the figures I gave, we should say, are registered, active registered voters. Yeah.
Right, and I don't know what Cook does, but the upshot of that is it's a battleground district.
Definitely.
And maybe someone sent me some statistics this morning. There's 8,000 more registered Democrats than there are Republicans. So I think it's very winnable. As I said, I think Mrs. Lee is not a strong candidate. She hasn't done a whole lot for Nevada, and as I say, she just votes the party line.
And certainly, this district's been held by Republicans and Democrats over its history. The incumbent is running as a first re-election, always the most vulnerable time for an incumbent to run. You, by your own admission, I think, would say that you're not your typical Republican. You're not just the central casting, send us up a Republican. That wouldn't be you. You've got some different beliefs. You break with the party on certain issues and agree with them on some others.
Yeah, Steve, I think you're right, but I think positively. For example, education. Education to me is very important. When I ran for governor, we had a plan. And I was talking with someone who said, well, isn't education a Democrat issue? It's not. It's nonpartisan. I think certainly in terms of the economy, I think this state, if it's going to grow, needs to stop subsidizing the casino industry. I mean, it's a great industry. It's what made Nevada what it is. But if we continue to just feature entertainment here, sure, it'll prosper, but what happens to the rest of the state? So I think I take a principled, objective view. I favor a lot of the conservative Republican issues, such as smaller government, local government, free enterprise, but I don't necessarily fall into the categories.
Yeah, even you presented in 2015 a tax proposal of your own, but even in doing that, it was to avoid a different tax, a commerce tax, which you opposed that commerce tax that was eventually adopted.
Yeah, I mean, I think the commerce tax, again, this was part of Governor Sandoval's $1.2 billion tax hike. and the commerce tax is effectively a tax on total revenue.
Yeah.
That's not how you tax people. So yes, I was opposed to it. I think there are other ways to get revenue for the state, including cutting some of the costs. But let's look at a tax that and I'm not, just for the record, I am not for a corporate income tax. I'm not for a personal income tax for Nevada. I think that's one of our great economic advantages. But, and again, this was one of my objections to the stadium. This was $750 million of public revenue. And this money could have been taken and used for education. It could have been used for highways. No, it's being used to build a football stadium.
Yeah.
So.
And that's one of the things you're also known for, as sort of being a detractor of some of these projects that take taxpayer money. You were literally the only person, as far as I can recall, who said that Faraday Future was not going to happen. It was ephemeral, and as it turns out, you were right. There was a lot of egg on a lot of people's faces over that one. So definitely not right in the mainstream with all of the other Republicans in Nevada. Let's talk about your opponent. You mentioned a couple of times democratic socialism. Do you think that Susie Lee is in that same group? Could she be a member of the so-called squad, do you think?
I don't think she could be a member of the squad, and the reason I say that, and as I say, Mrs. Lee is a nice person, nice smile. I don't think she's an anti-Semite, which is what Omar is. I don't think she's a loudmouth, which AOC is. And the other two are just in the scrum together. But I think, in a sense, it's just as insidious, is that she, if you look at her voting record, it's consistently for Nancy Pelosi. Whatever Mrs. Pelosi wants, Susie Lee is there to vote yes. And the problem with that is the Democrats, as a totality, and as a totality in Congress, really are in favor of big government. That the big government is a solution to all their problems. The Green Deal. Bernie wants to have free education. They're jumping over themselves to give more free stuff. And Mrs. Lee is right in that crowd. Look at her voting record. She is yes for everything. I
can kind of look ahead 4 years from now. Let's say that you won and the Republicans took back the House. I could see a Democrat sitting in that chair 2 years from now telling me, well, Dan Schwartz has already voted for Kevin McCarthy. Everything Kevin McCarthy wants, he votes for.
Steve, let me say one thing. Don't count on that.
Okay. Don't count on the winning or
count on the winning.
Kevin McCarthy.
Don't count that I'm going to be as I said, I think Kevin's a great leader. I think I've known Kevin for 15 years. I met him when he was a member of the California Assembly. I think he was the minority leader.
Yeah.
He receives rave reviews, but I'm truthfully a little disappointed in how he has handled the last 2.5 years. So I will be a loyal member, but don't count on that.
In terms of Susie Lee, is there a particular issue or a particular vote that you can point to and said, she voted for this, and I totally disagree with that. I would totally do it differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll take one. The anti-bias law that Mrs. Pelosi sort of engineered, and this is a great example of appeasement. We're not going back to Neville Chamberlain. Representative Omar is a rabid anti-Semite. She should have been expelled from Congress, and Mrs. Pelosi blinked. Okay, and then when they put up this bill, which, well, it's not anti-Semitism, it's discrimination.
You're talking about the bill that sort of excuses the boycott, divest, and sanction movement.
It does everything. It whitewashes the issue, and I think that's wrong. I think that Mrs. Lee should have voted not for it, but against it, because it whitewashes someone who should not be in Congress, and she should not be in Congress because she's an anti-Semite. And Congress is many things, but it's not a platform for bigotry. And this recent set of tweets with President Trump. I don't think President Trump is a racist. I think he's a very clever politician. And what he did is the American people dislike the Squad, but not for reasons of race, gender, or national origin. These are just bad people. And I think President Trump understood that, and on top of which he maneuvered Mrs. Pelosi into a position where she's supporting it.
Well, speaking of President Trump and his tweets, obviously he's going to figure very prominently. He'll be at the top of the ticket. There's no Senate race, so you're going to be right under him. Do you think his presence on the ticket is going to help you or hurt you?
Let me answer the question this way. I support President Trump, but I support him on specific issues. I think he's onto something in China. I think there's some real give and take there that has to happen. We really built the new China. In turn, they bought our treasury bonds. But I think we're not going to change a state-owned economy, but I think we need to have our U.S. companies have to have a better competitive position there. I liked his tax reform bill. I think you see the economy is booming. I would like to have seen it, give a few more benefits to the middle class. But
you would have voted for it.
I would have voted for it. Yeah, absolutely. So those are just two examples. And it's criminal justice. I think this. I don't know if you saw that. This criminal justice bill, which I think is great, and it was a bipartisan bill. President Trump supported it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of his policies that I like.
So in terms of you said we wanted to have more benefits for the middle class. How would you go about doing that? What are you talking about there?
Well, I think just in the context of the tax bill, okay, and I think the tax bill, the truth is the tax bill really benefits corporate America. Yeah. And and this to me is what bothers me a little bit about the Republican leadership. There is they should just say, yeah, this bill really it benefits corporate America for the theory that ultimately if we benefit corporate America, this will kind of dribble down to the rest. I don't think it really helped the middle class. Yeah. And what you need to fix that, you could. I just assume not see them raise the rate. I don't think they should raise any of the rates, but maybe they lower some of the personal income tax rates. I'm also not in favor of
for a particular income bracket.
Yeah. And what's middle class? Maybe it's 40 or 50,000 to 250,000, and I think those rates should be lowered more.
You mentioned, and other candidates who've been on the show have mentioned this whole tension between capitalism and democratic socialism and all of that. Do you think that there is a real move towards socialism, or is this a move towards sort of attenuating some aspects of the capitalist economy so that the kind of benefits that you're talking about are achievable?
Yeah, I mean, again, Steve, I think you pose a good question. Okay, and I think there's no question that there's an increasing gap between the ultra-rich and the other 99%.
Right, which a lot of those candidates are exploiting.
That's right. And all I can say is that we have been a capitalist economy for 230 years, and it's worked pretty well. And the problem with socialism is it's never worked. Okay. Now you can have Denmark and France and to an extent the UK, and I'm not even talking about the communists, but let's just say the socialist countries, they work fine. But where is the creativity? Where is the innovation? Where is the dynamism of our economy? It's not there. So effectively, and I think this is the real issue in our campaign, what you're doing is you're undermining the foundations of our economy and our culture. Small business is, I think, like 99% of the businesses. They need to be nurtured, and they can't be nurtured by a bunch of bureaucrats sitting in Washington. Yeah. And I think that's the real danger.
So we would lose that, in your view?
If you start giving away more free stuff, what is the incentive to produce?
Is there a way you think to achieve a bipartisan consensus? You mentioned the criminal justice bill as being one of the rare examples I think we can point to. Maybe this deal with the debt ceiling, lifting that as another bipartisan example. But those are few and far between. With someone who, like yourself, is an avowed capitalist, and someone who, like, will take Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as a democratic socialist, or Bernie Sanders, someone like that, is there common ground? Is there a way to achieve legislation that you both can agree on, that we could pass, that the president would sign, that would benefit the majority of the people?
You know, I've thought about that question, another very, very thoughtful question. And I'm not sure that there is. There's certainly, I think that Republicans can be a little bit more understanding. I know a lot of people who live paycheck to paycheck, or they don't have any, the big danger is they have no retirement savings. Something like 40% of Americans live on Social Security. So, and the challenge is, how do you solve that within a free private enterprise economy? In other words, instead of just handing those issues to big government, the government will solve it. And the government does some things good. There's a space program and there's some research grants, but even the space program now is being handed over to Elon and others in the private sphere. So I think it's not so much, I'm for healthcare, but I think I'm not for a single payer government healthcare plan. And the reason is, just when the government gets in, the old saying, the proverbial saying, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. It's not help. I mean, it needs, and there's a theory called diseconomies, okay? And you've studied that, and I think the government is best involved in diseconomies. And again, a good example there is antitrust. Where you have the object of business is to run the market. Antitrust is to say, no, you can't do that. That's anti-competitive. So it effectively inserts itself where the aims of business are contrary to public policy.
Interesting. Yeah. Let's talk about a couple specific Nevada issues. Yucca Mountain's always a big issue. Recently, the federal government admitted that it had shipped plutonium here without the knowledge or consent of the state during the pendency of a lawsuit to prevent that very thing from happening. Is there a solution? Would you stand with the majority of the delegation and say no to Yucca Mountain?
I don't, and I say this is my position on Yucca Mountain is we ought to have the discussion. And I think what's happened to date is the gaming industry in Las Vegas has just shut it off, and they've donated to that effect. And I've actually looked at it, and a lot of the complaints against Yucca Mountain are just unfounded. I mean, everyone, if you say Yucca Mountain, everyone thinks of this heap of something radiating neutrons. That's not the case, okay? And, I understand it's 90 miles from Las Vegas, and I wouldn't even mind a referendum. That it's a contentious issue. I understand the gaming industry in Las Vegas wants absolutely no possibility of anything happening. Yucca Mountain, on the other hand, it would provide needed jobs. It provides some income. And what you could do is do a trade-off. I mean, I'm a big proponent of some infrastructure improvements. And I'll say, okay, well, we want to talk about this, but we'll give you Yucca Mountain if you give us our high-speed train and our I-11 up to I-80. Yeah, there's ways to, and I think we should do that.
You mentioned the Green New Deal earlier. Do you think nuclear power is part of the energy future? It's zero emission electricity?
I've looked. I actually was talking to potential donors, and one of the guys there is against solar power. Okay, and his point is that none of these plants really work. Okay, nuclear power, obviously, you have Fukushima and 3 Mile Island. I think that properly installed, nuclear power is no more dangerous than any of these others. And I think we need all the solutions. Coal is a dirty fuel, but if you all of a sudden cut off coal, a lot of people lose their jobs, and that government should not do that.
Yeah. You have been known as a skeptic of these programs that offer incentives to companies that generally don't need the money to come to a particular state and set up shop there. Faraday Future being a prime example, but the list could go on. Car manufacturers, other businesses. And is there anything you think at the federal level that can be done to prevent what goes on now, which is states competing against each other with taxpayer dollars to essentially offer bribes to companies to come set up in their particular state in order to get the jobs and economic benefits?
Yeah, see, I mean, I think you by asking the question, you make a very good point. I think there was actually an article in the RJ not all that long ago which said that none of these things have worked. In other words, that they, the benefits, like they hired 10% of the people, and they hired like 30% of the people, and they got 10% of the investment. Amazon and Apple certainly don't need help. I mean, they're both trillion-dollar companies. Yeah. Why is the poor taxpayer in Nevada subsidizing their building a project here? This is a great state. We have no corporate tax. We have no personal income tax. The cost of living is a half to a third of what it is in California. The regulations are less. So that, to me, I mean, I think we don't promote it. I mean, if you're in business, you just don't sit there and say, aha, they're going to come for me. But I think if
is there a way, though, that the federal government should get involved?
I think it's difficult, just given the Constitution, and this is a legitimate activity of state governments. Yeah. And but I think we need people at the state level who are going to say, wait a minute, here are all the other benefits you get. I lived in Hong Kong for a number of years, and we had great infrastructure, we had great services, and the theory there is that they didn't offer anyone any special benefits. They just built a great infrastructure. They had great services, and I mean, I remember having a choice between people say, well, Dan, you should expand into China or to Southeast Asia. I said, no, I really like it here. My wages were twice what they were, or 3 times, or 4 times what they were in the mainland. But the services and the infrastructure more than compensated for that. And I think that's Nevada's argument.
What about the public lands issue? There are a lot of people in the state that say that they want the federal government to turn over a lot more of the public land that is controlled and owned by the federal government to the state. Other people say there's costs associated with that, especially wildfire costs, maintenance costs, and all of that, and the state couldn't bear those costs alone. What do you think? There's some in the 3rd district. There's some national monuments and other things that people say maybe we should restrict those or constrict those. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, you again, another very good point. I actually talked to a newly elected member of the city council, not the newest, but the one right before. And her comment was, Las Vegas actually has an issue because there's like sort of checkerboards there. Yeah. And the issue isn't so much that the government won't turn them over, it's who's going to pay for it. And Las Vegas says, we that's our land, we want it for free. And BLM is saying, not so fast. We've maintained it, we've watered the flowers, you got to pay us. And I think that's the issue, is that, as always, who's going to pay for it? And I think, as I said, I think Nevada, within reason, I don't think we want like 80, I think the federal government has 85 or 86% of the land. I don't think we want it all back, but we certainly want the land back within the urban areas. There are probably some other lands. And I think, the federal government should be reasonable, and if they want to sell it to us at a very low price. But I think it does belong to us, and we should get it back. Yeah.
The sage grouse issue is not, it doesn't affect the 3rd district as much as, say, the 4th and the 2nd, but a lot of people warn if that happens, then we're in big trouble in terms of the use of a lot of land, not just in Nevada, but throughout the West. Do you think that should be listed as an endangered species or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm staying out of that one just because there aren't any sage grouse in CD3. I've ridden the circuit for the Republican Party. I've been up north. I've heard all of the complaints and the diatribes against listing it as an endangered species, and I have no opinion on that.
On the sage grouse. Yeah. One final political question, and that is the role of the Hispanic community. It's a growing part of the electorate. There are people who say, look, if you don't plan for and build and incorporate that into your campaign, there's no way you can win, or at least it's much, much harder to win. What plans do you have on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I think your question is makes a point, and I think that the Hispanic community, the Latino community, is about 30% of the population. I think about 16 to 17%. And I think, you know, and again, the illegal immigrants are a whole undocumented work is a whole nother issue. But I think that we as a state, and especially as a Western state, have to recognize the fact that the Hispanic community is an important part of our state. It's an important part of our community. Truthfully, I'd like to see us recruit. In other words, I think we should open up a Nevada recruiting station on the border. And, you know, we don't have to take everyone, but I think if you look at the housing shortage here, why is there a shortage here? Because we don't have enough electricians, we don't have enough plumbers, we don't have enough subcontractors. Why not hire those people from Mexico or from wherever? But the bottom line answer is I think the Hispanic community is an integral part of our state. We should recognize that and plan accordingly.
Do you have, in terms of the border policy, do you have an opinion as to whether what we're doing now is the right approach, the building of the wall, the family separation, the new policy with respect to asylum seekers and all that, or would you change how things are done there at the border?
Yeah, I mean, again, a sensitive issue. What I truly believe is we need an immigration bill, okay? And Congress, I think the last immigration bill was like, correct me if I'm wrong, 1965, I mean, almost 50 years ago.
The last successful policy. I think in Reagan's era there was an amnesty and a reform bill there.
Yeah, and let's. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but again, why do I want to go to Washington? Is because they can't solve this stuff, and I think it's high time that people who are elected to Congress took the lead and said, wait a minute, I'm being paid by the taxpayer. They're trusting me to get the job done, and I'm not getting the job done for political reasons. I think Mrs. Pelosi doesn't want to. There's no budget. Mrs. Pelosi, although I guess they've agreed on one, didn't want to do it, so she didn't want to embarrass her members. So I think we need a bill. I also think, and maybe the substantive part is, I don't think the U.S. taxpayer should bear the brunt of supporting unlimited access to the country. I mean, I think if we can get a bill that sets certain criteria, then I can know, you know, should I build a wall or not build a wall? Or should I let grandma in, or should they all have Harvard PhDs? But we haven't made that decision yet. So, as I say, one of my hopes in going to Washington is to catalyze, as a freshman Republican in the minority, but hopefully in the majority, that process.
Yeah, and that's going to be that would be a tough position, right? I mean, to go back and be in the minority in Congress, you have virtually no power whatsoever.
I take tough positions. I took a tough position against Governor Sandoval on the budget. I took a tough position on Faraday Future and the Phantom Plant. I took a tough position on the stadium. I think that it is poorly conceived and badly financed. And I saw just the other day, and you're going to see a lot more of this, is instead of being $1.8 billion, it's now $1.9 billion. It's going to keep going up. And then you're going to wake up one day and there's going to be a headline, Stadium Authority out of money, Governor Sisolak calls special session. We've seen that before.
Let's hope that doesn't happen anytime soon.
Count on it.
Well, Dan Schwartz, thanks very much for being on the show. We appreciate it, and we'll hope you come back as the campaign goes on.
Good. Thanks, Theo. I really appreciate it and enjoy being here.
Sounds good.
Thank you.